Aria steps inside the house, feeling the weight of the crumpled paper in her hand. She grips it tightly, as if it could slip away or somehow disappear if she lets go. The air inside the house is thick, heavy with the tension of the unknown, and she can already sense Felix's presence even before she sees him. Her mind races as she tries to figure out how to approach him, how to break the news. Felix's words echo in her mind, relentless and unyielding. "You can't get pregnant." It wasn't just a warning, it was a command. His expectations were clear, and Aria had tried to abide by them, but life had a way of throwing curveballs. This wasn't just any surprise. This was a life-changing revelation. When she reaches her room, Aria's hands tremble as she sets the bag down on the bed. She moves slowly, as if walking in a dream she can't wake from, and lies down, staring at the ceiling. The silence around her feels suffocating, but she knows she has to confront it. The paper, with the confirmation of her pregnancy, is tucked safely under her pillow, but it feels like the secret is gnawing at her from within. She closes her eyes, but sleep doesn't come easily. Aria's stomach churns, and the thought of facing Felix, telling him, makes her stomach tighten. Despite her exhaustion, the reality of her situation is inescapable. She knows there is no turning back now, but what will she do when he finds out? The questions swirl in her mind, and the room feels colder as she lies there, trapped in her own thoughts. After some time, sleep takes over, but it's restless. When she wakes up, the nausea is undeniable. She stumbles into the bathroom, barely able to stop herself from falling to the floor as she vomits. Her reflection in the mirror only seems to mock her. Who is she anymore? How did she end up in this situation? There was the first pregnancy, unexpected, confusing, and still an unresolved mystery about who the father was. Now, here she was again, but this time, she knew the father. The question, though, lingered. Would Felix, the man she had been living with for so long, even take responsibility? Would he care? Aria moves slowly, her steps heavier than before, as if the gravity of her situation is weighing down on her with every movement. She looks at herself in the mirror once more, but this time, it's not just a glance. It's a challenge to herself. She asks herself, who am I becoming? Felix's voice cuts through the silence like a blade. You can't get pregnant. The words haunt her as they always had, a constant reminder of the deal they'd made. Or perhaps the one he'd forced on her. He didn't want a child. He didn't want any responsibilities. Aria's chest tightens at the thought of it. She hears him in the hallway, the sound of his footsteps unmistakable. He's angry again, but this time, it's different. The tension between them has been building, like a storm waiting to erupt, and she can't hide from it. Much longer. She can't hide from him any longer. Aria goes downstairs, knowing that every step is leading her closer to the confrontation she's been dreading. Her head is spinning. She's scared, not just for the future, but for the child inside her. She doesn't know what will happen if Felix finds out. She doesn't know what will happen if he doesn't find out. Her emotions are in a constant tug of war. When she reaches the kitchen, she feels the familiar wave of nausea rise again. She stumbles to the sink, and just like before, she throws up, but this time, there's nothing left inside her stomach. She turns on the faucet, the cold water splashing on her face, offering no comfort. Then, she feels the presence behind her, cold and imposing. It's Felix. She knows it without turning around. His voice is like ice, calm yet filled with an undercurrent of danger. What's happening to you? She closes her eyes, struggling to gather herself, and wipes her mouth, but the trembling won't stop. When she turns to face him, she's caught in the intensity of his gaze. His eyes, dark and piercing, lock onto hers, and for a moment, she feels exposed, vulnerable. I'm pregnant. Her voice is barely a whisper, but it lands like a bomb between them. Felix's reaction is immediate. His jaw tightens, his eyes narrowing with disbelief. He steps back, as if the words she spoke are a physical blow. His face turns pale, but his anger, as always, quickly replaces any other emotion. He runs a hand through his hair and looks away, struggling to find the words that will contain his fury. "You're what?" His voice is strained, disbelieving. "Pregnant. I'm pregnant, Felix," Aria repeats, this time with more strength, though the nerves still rattle her. Felix's body stiffens. He turns, clutching the back of his neck, as if trying to calm himself. The silence between them grows unbearable. The kitchen, once a place of warmth, now feels like a battleground. Aria can feel the walls closing in. How did this happen? Felix's voice rises, though still controlled. It's a question that cuts through the air like a blade. Aria hangs her head, ashamed. The weight of his stare is too much to bear. "I didn't take the pills," she murmurs. Felix's face darkens. His hands ball into fists at his sides, and for a moment, Aria wonders if he will hit something or someone. "What?" His voice is a low growl, almost a snarl. "We had a deal, Aria. Our conversation was clear. You can't get pregnant." "I'm sorry," Aria whispers, her voice breaking. "Sorry." His voice cracks with disbelief. "That's all you have to say?" He takes a step closer, and Aria instinctively shrinks back, her heart racing. "Why didn't you take the pills, Aria?" he demands, his voice thick with anger. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she says, trying to explain, but her words feel useless in the face of his fury. His lips curl into a bitter smile. "Do you know why I can't let you have this baby?" He looks at her with cold disdain. "Because I don't want commitment, Aria. I made that clear from the start." He steps back, crossing his arms. His eyes lock onto hers. "And it's not you, Aria. It's not you I want to have a child with. Not you. Not in my wildest dreams." Her throat tightens at his words, but she says nothing. The pain is overwhelming, but she's learned to swallow it, burying it deep inside. She's used to this. "You're here because I needed you to be," Felix continues, each word like a hammer striking her heart. "I paid for you. You're here because I want you in my bed, not in my life." Aria closes her eyes to block out his words, but they continue to echo in her mind. His dismissal stings, and her entire being aches with the weight of his indifference. "Fix this, Aria," he orders, his voice cold and final. She stands frozen, unable to move as he leaves, his footsteps echoing in the hallway. Aria stares after him, her body shaking, heart breaking. She's alone now, more than ever. But before he disappears completely, she can't hold it in any longer. The words burst from her, raw and defiant. "What are you going to do if I want to continue my pregnancy?" Felix pauses. For a moment, she dares to hope. Hopes that he will look back, show even the smallest glimmer of mercy. But he doesn't. His voice, when it comes, is calm, controlled, like he's made up his mind already. "Fix it, Aria, before I fix it for you." The kitchen is quiet once Felix leaves. Aria stands in the same spot, unable to move, her legs feeling weak and unsteady. The silence seems deafening, but it's a silence she's grown accustomed to. She finally allows herself to collapse onto the couch, the weight of the moment sinking in. There is no going back now. Felix has made his stance clear, and she knows, feels, the consequences of her choices pressing down on her. Her mind keeps returning to the child growing inside her. She's torn. She knows she can't change what's happening to her body, but she doesn't want to submit to Felix's demands. Something inside her stirs, something primal, protective. This child, even though it was conceived in a haze of uncertainty and pain, is hers. She won't let anyone take that away from her. But what if she has no choice? What if Felix is right? The thought torments her. Her body trembles, not just with fear, but with a growing sense of defiance. She's never been the type to stand up for herself, not against Felix at least. But this is different. This is something she can't let go of. Aria's thoughts spiral. Where is Isaac? Why has he been gone for so long? If he were here, maybe he would protect her. Maybe he would stand by her side, like he had before. But Isaac is a mystery now. His absence only deepens the chasm between her and any sense of security. She doesn't know where to turn. But one thing is certain, she cannot stay silent any longer. The morning after the confrontation with Felix, Aria wakes up, but the bed feels colder than it ever has before. She doesn't remember falling asleep, but the exhaustion is still there, weighing down her body. The paper with the pregnancy confirmation is still tucked under her pillow, but now it feels like a foreign object, something that once held meaning but now only serves to remind her of the decision she has to face. Her thoughts are in a whirlwind as she stares at the ceiling, barely aware of the world around her. What will happen next? She knows Felix will be waiting for her to break, to fall into his demands. But she can't. Not this time. She won't. The moment she steps out of her room, she is immediately aware of the silence that lingers in the house. It's oppressive, like the calm before a storm. She makes her way to the kitchen, but there's no sign of Felix. He's likely hiding away, brooding, or maybe waiting for her to come to him, to make the first move. Aria's stomach churns as she pours herself a glass of water, her hands shaking ever so slightly. She wonders if he's already decided what he'll do next. Will he force her into a decision she's not ready to make? Will he disappear completely, leaving her alone to deal with the consequences? She's about to head back to her room when the sound of Felix's voice breaks the silence. "We need to talk," he says, his tone flat and detached. She looks up and sees him standing in the doorway, his posture rigid. His face is unreadable, but there's something dangerous in the way he stands, like a predator waiting for its prey to make a move. Aria swallows hard, her mouth suddenly dry. She doesn't know what to say, but she knows she can't let him control her anymore. She must stand her ground, no matter how terrified she feels. "I'm not changing my mind," she says quietly, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "I'm keeping the baby." Felix's expression hardens. His lips tighten, but his eyes flicker with something. Resentment, anger, or maybe even fear. She's not sure, but it's enough to make her heart race. He takes a step toward her, his jaw clenched. "You don't understand," he says, his voice low, almost threatening. "This wasn't part of the deal. You think you can just keep the child and expect me to be okay with it? You've made a huge mistake, Aria." Aria feels her anger rising, fueled by his dismissal, his lack of empathy. "I didn't make a mistake. I'm not going to let you control me anymore. This is my life, Felix. I'll handle it, even if you won't." Felix's eyes narrow, and for a moment, she wonders if he's going to lash out, if he's going to do something that will destroy her. But then, he just stands there, his fists clenched at his sides. "You really think you can do this alone?" he asks, his voice dangerously soft. "You're nothing without me, Aria." The words strike her like a slap to the face, but she doesn't flinch. Instead, she meets his gaze, refusing to back down. "I don't need you. I never have." Felix looks at her, as if trying to decide whether or not to challenge her. The tension between them is palpable, and for a moment, it feels like time itself is holding its breath. Finally, he speaks again, his voice low and cold. "You'll regret this, Aria. I promise you, you will." The next few days pass in a blur of silence and strained interactions. Felix remains distant, his anger simmering just beneath the surface, and Aria can't shake the feeling that he's waiting for her to break, waiting for her to give in to his demands. But the silence is suffocating. Every glance, every word that passes between them is laced with tension. Aria knows she can't keep living like this, but she's also afraid of what might happen if she leaves. Where will she go? What will she do? She's never been on her own, and the idea of facing the world without Felix, without the semblance of security he provides, feels terrifying. One evening, after another of their tense, barely there conversations, Aria finds herself standing by the window in her room, staring out at the world beyond. It's raining lightly, the steady rhythm of the drops tapping against the glass. The sound is soothing, almost hypnotic, and for a brief moment, she allows herself to be swept away by it. But then, the door creaks open behind her. She doesn't turn around. She already knows who it is. Felix stands there, watching her with an unreadable expression. "What do you want, Felix?" she asks, her voice tired but resolute. She doesn't want to fight anymore, but she also won't let him think he can control her. Not anymore. "I'm not going to make this easy for you," he says, his voice tinged with frustration. "You can't just keep the baby and expect everything to be fine. I'm not going to let that happen." Aria's heart pounds in her chest, but she refuses to let it show. She turns to face him, her expression calm but her eyes burning with defiance. "I'm not asking for your permission. I'm keeping the baby, and that's final." Felix steps closer, his eyes narrowing. "You think you can do this alone? You really think you can raise a child on your own, with no help, no support?" Aria opens her mouth to reply, but before she can speak, Felix grabs her arm, his grip tight. The sudden contact shocks her, and for a moment, she's frozen in place. "You have no idea what you're getting yourself into," he says, his voice low and menacing. "You think you can just walk away from me, from everything we've built? You think you can take my child and expect me to let you go?" Aria pulls away from him, her heart racing. "I don't need you," she repeats, her voice shaking with a mix of fear and anger. "I never did." Felix's expression falters for a moment, something unreadable crossing his face. But then, just as quickly, his mask of indifference slips back into place. He steps back, shaking his head. "You're making a mistake, Aria," he says softly, "but I won't stop you. I'll just make sure you regret it." With that, he turns and walks out, leaving Aria standing in the room, feeling more alone than ever. Days pass, and Aria's decision begins to feel like both a weight and a glimmer of light. She is carrying Felix's child, but she refuses to let that define her. She will raise this baby on her own if she has to. The thought of Felix's betrayal stings, but there's something deep inside her that keeps her moving forward. Despite her resolve, the loneliness creeps in. She often finds herself lost in thought, wondering if she's making the right choice. Can she really do this on her own? The fear is real, but there's something stronger within her. A fierce, protective love for the child she carries. She knows she must protect this little life, even if it means standing against Felix, even if it means standing alone. But there are moments, brief and fleeting, when she wonders about Isaac. Where is he? Why has he been absent for so long? What happened to him? A part of her still longs for the comfort of his presence, the safety of his support. But she can't wait for him forever. One evening, as Aria sits alone in the living room, her thoughts consumed by the future, the doorbell rings. It's unexpected, and her heart skips a beat. She hesitates before getting up to answer the door, unsure of who it might be. When she opens it, her breath catches in her throat. Standing there, with a mix of uncertainty and concern in his eyes, is Isaac. Isaac's presence at the door feels like a storm breaking after a long period of tension. Aria stands frozen for a moment, her breath catching in her throat. Her heart races as a mix of emotions floods her mind. Relief, confusion, uncertainty. She didn't expect this. Not now. Not after everything that's happened. Isaac looks at her with a combination of guilt and longing, as if he's not sure if he's welcome. His usual confidence is gone, replaced by a vulnerability that she's never seen before. The years they spent together, the bond they shared, now seem like a distant memory, one that's been torn apart by time, circumstance, and their own choices. "I'm sorry, Aria," he says, his voice soft but filled with remorse. "I didn't know where else to go. I've been lost." He runs a hand through his hair, his eyes avoiding hers for a moment before finally meeting her gaze. "I heard about what happened and You disappeared," Aria interrupts, her voice tinged with a mix of anger and hurt. "You disappeared when I needed you most. And now you're back? After everything?" Isaac flinches at her words, and for a moment, he doesn't speak. He looks as though he's searching for the right thing to say, but nothing seems to come out. Aria wants to be angry, wants to scream at him for abandoning her. But there's a part of her that still wants to reach out, still wants to hold on to the friendship they once shared. "I'm sorry, Aria," Isaac repeats, his voice thick with emotion. "I never meant to hurt you. I thought I was protecting you. I thought if I stayed away, it would be easier for you." Aria's eyes sting with unshed tears as she steps back, allowing Isaac to enter. The door closes behind him, but the silence between them feels heavier than ever. "I don't know what to do anymore, Isaac," she says quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm pregnant. Felix. He wants me to get rid of it, to make it go away. But I can't. I can't do that, Isaac. I've made up my mind." Isaac's face softens as he takes a step toward her, his eyes filled with concern. "Aria," he begins, his voice gentle. "You don't have to do this alone. You don't have to go through this by yourself." "I don't want to," she admits, her voice breaking. "But Felix, he doesn't care. He doesn't care about me, about the baby. And now you're here, but I don't know what to believe anymore. I don't know who I can trust." Isaac reaches out, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I'm here now," he says softly, "and I'm not going anywhere." The next few days are a whirlwind of conflicting emotions and choices. Aria feels a glimmer of hope now that Isaac is back, but the shadow of Felix still looms over everything. She can't escape the feeling that he's watching her, waiting for her to slip up, to make a mistake he can use against her. Felix hasn't spoken to her since their last confrontation, but his presence is always there, hanging in the air like a storm cloud. Aria knows he's waiting for her to back down, to give in to his demands, but she won't. She can't. Isaac stays close, offering her support and reassurance. His return brings comfort, but also uncertainty. Aria knows that the path ahead is far from simple. There are too many variables, too many forces at play, and she's not sure she's strong enough to face them all. One evening, as Aria and Isaac sit in the living room, the sound of a car pulling up outside makes her stomach tighten. She doesn't need to look out the window to know who it is. Felix has arrived. Isaac stands, his body tensing. "I'll handle this," he says quietly, his voice firm. He doesn't wait for a response before heading toward the door. Aria watches, a knot forming in her stomach. She doesn't know what will happen next. Will Felix explode in anger? Will he try to manipulate Isaac into doing his bidding? The uncertainty makes her feel like she's standing on the edge of a cliff, unsure of which way to jump. When Isaac opens the door, Felix steps inside without waiting for an invitation. His cold gaze sweeps over the room, settling on Aria, and she feels a chill run down her spine. He doesn't look angry, not exactly. He looks calculating. "So, Isaac," Felix says, his voice smooth but laced with venom. "You're back. How convenient." Isaac's posture doesn't shift. He stands tall, facing Felix head-on, refusing to be intimidated. "I'm not here to play your games, Felix. You don't get to control her anymore." Felix laughs, but there's no humor in it. "You think you can protect her? From me? From what I can do to her?" He turns his gaze to Aria, and the intensity in his eyes sends a shiver down her spine. "You can't escape this, Aria. You'll see. I always get what I want." Isaac steps forward, his jaw clenched. "You're not going to get anything from her. Not this time." Felix's expression darkens, but before he can say anything more, Aria speaks, her voice steady but laced with fear. "I'm not afraid of you, Felix. I've made my decision. I'm keeping the baby." For a moment, everything is silent. Felix's gaze flickers between Isaac and Aria, his anger simmering just beneath the surface. Finally, he speaks, his voice barely above a whisper. "You'll regret this, Aria. I'll make sure of it." And with that, he turns on his heel and walks out, leaving the air thick with tension. The tension between Aria, Isaac, and Felix reaches a breaking point. Days pass, and the atmosphere in the house grows increasingly strained. Felix's threats linger in the air, but Aria refuses to be swayed. She is resolute in her decision to keep the baby, but the constant presence of fear, of what Felix might do next, eats away at her peace of mind. Isaac remains by her side, offering words of encouragement, but even he can't shake the sense of impending danger. He knows what Felix is capable of, and he fears what might happen if Felix follows through on his promises. One night, after a particularly tense dinner, Aria finds herself sitting alone in the living room, her thoughts swirling. She's exhausted, physically and emotionally, but she refuses to let herself break. She won't. Suddenly, the door bursts open, and before she can react, Felix is standing in front of her, his eyes wild with fury. "You think you can just walk away from me, Aria? You think you can make a life without me?" Aria stands, her heart pounding in her chest. "I'm not walking away from you, Felix. I'm walking toward a better life. A life for my child. And I'm not going to let you destroy that." Felix's gaze hardens, his jaw clenching as he takes a step toward her. "You really think you can do this without me? You're nothing. You'll always be nothing, Aria." Aria holds her ground, refusing to back down. "I am more than you'll ever give me credit for, and I'll raise this baby, with or without you." For a long moment, Felix doesn't speak, his chest rising and falling with each breath. Finally, he gives her a look that is equal parts rage and cold calculation. "Don't make me regret this, Aria," he warns, before turning and walking out the door, leaving her standing in the silence of the room, trembling but unwavering. The following days blur into one long, torturous stretch of time. The house feels like a prison, every corner echoing with the unspoken tension between Felix, Isaac, and Aria. She can almost hear the quiet hum of her heartbeat whenever Felix is near. It's as if the entire world is holding its breath, waiting for something to snap. She can feel it in the way Felix's eyes linger on her, the way his presence seems to loom larger every time she tries to take a step forward. Isaac, for his part, is still here, but the warmth he once provided feels like a distant memory. Aria can sense his own discomfort, as if the unspoken rift between him and Felix is pushing him further away. He's been silent, perhaps out of caution, but Aria knows him better than anyone. He's struggling to make sense of the mess she finds herself in, just as much as she is. One night, after an unsettling conversation with Felix, Aria retreats to her room, her thoughts swirling. She hasn't been able to focus on anything for days. The weight of everything, the pregnancy, Felix's threats, the undeniable pull of the past, sits heavily on her chest. Sitting on the edge of her bed, she stares at the reflection in the mirror, her hand resting lightly over the small curve of her stomach. Her heart swells with a strange mix of love and fear. Can she really raise this child on her own? What will the future hold for them? The uncertainty gnaws at her. Suddenly, a knock on the door pulls her from her thoughts. Isaac steps inside without waiting for a response, his face tense but determined. "Are you okay?" he asks quietly, his gaze scanning her face. Aria forces a smile, though it feels fragile and thin. "Yeah, just thinking." Isaac walks over, sitting beside her on the bed. He's been here more often in recent days, providing a sense of stability in a world that feels anything but stable. He's been her rock, but even he can't dispel the dark cloud of fear that seems to follow her wherever she goes. "I hate seeing you like this," Isaac says, his voice low. He reaches out, his hand brushing against hers in a gentle, reassuring touch. "You don't deserve any of this, Aria. You shouldn't have to fight so hard to have a life of your own." Aria's throat tightens, and she fights back tears. She knows Isaac means well, but part of her feels like she's losing him too. "I don't know what to do anymore," she admits, her voice barely a whisper. "Felix won't stop. He keeps coming back, saying that I'm making a mistake, and I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this." Isaac's expression hardens. "You're stronger than you think. You don't have to do this alone. I'll help you, Aria. I promise." But the words feel hollow. The reality of their situation is too complicated, and as much as Aria wants to believe him, she knows that the forces at play, Felix's manipulation, her own fear of being abandoned, the growing pressure to make the right decision, are bigger than any promise he can offer. The tension reaches its breaking point when Felix arrives unexpectedly one afternoon, his dark silhouette standing in the doorway like a shadow that refuses to leave. Aria feels a shiver run down her spine. The air in the house thickens, a tangible dread settling over everything. "You can't keep running away from this," Felix says, his voice cold and biting. His eyes flicker over to Isaac, who stands by the kitchen counter, his expression unreadable. Felix's gaze hardens. "And you," he spits, "are no better. I don't want you interfering in my life, Isaac." Isaac stands up straighter, his fists clenched. "I'm not the one making your life a mess, Felix. That's all on you." The words cut through the thick atmosphere, and for a moment, Aria feels caught in the middle of something much darker than she ever anticipated. She opens her mouth to speak, but Felix cuts her off before she can form a single word. "You think this is a game?" Felix sneers, his eyes fixed on Aria. "You think you can just keep this child and walk away from me? You're not strong enough for this, Aria. You never were. I've told you 100 times. You can't have a baby without consequences." Isaac steps forward, his face hardening. "She doesn't need your permission, Felix. You've done enough to her. This is between you and her. Leave me out of it." The tension between the two men is palpable, and Aria feels as though she's suffocating in the midst of it. Every word they exchange feels like it's pushing her further from any kind of peace. She wants to scream, to tell them both to stop, but instead, she stands in silence, her hands trembling by her sides. Felix's gaze flickers to Aria once again, his expression unreadable. "You think you can just have a life without me?" he mutters, almost as if to himself. "You'll regret this. You'll regret ever thinking you could stand up to me." With that, he turns sharply, leaving the room in a swirl of anger. The door slams behind him, and the silence that follows feels deafening. Isaac exhales heavily, running a hand through his hair. "This is getting out of hand, Aria. I won't let him hurt you." Aria's heart beats erratically in her chest, but there's a part of her that still can't shake the fear. She feels like she's lost control of everything. "I don't know what to do anymore, Isaac. I thought I was stronger than this." Isaac looks at her, his expression softening with sympathy. "You are stronger than this, Aria. You've already made the hardest decision. Now you just have to hold on." Days pass in a haze of uncertainty. Felix's threats continue to linger, his words echoing in Aria's mind, but she refuses to let them dictate her every move. Isaac stays by her side, his presence a reminder that not everything is hopeless. But the weight of Felix's words, the reminder that everything she's fought for could be taken away at any moment, hangs over her like a dark cloud. One afternoon, after a particularly heated conversation with Isaac about the future, Aria goes for a walk to clear her mind. She doesn't know where she's going, but her feet seem to carry her to the park, the one place she used to go to find peace. The sun is beginning to set, casting a golden glow over everything, but it does little to calm the storm inside her. As she walks, her thoughts swirl. What kind of life will she be able to offer her child? What if Felix comes back with more threats? What if Isaac, her one constant support, decides he can't handle the weight of it all? Suddenly, she feels a presence behind her. She doesn't need to turn around to know who it is. She can feel his eyes on her, even from a distance. Felix. He's been following her for days now, and the feeling of being hunted is beginning to wear her thin. She turns to face him, her posture defensive. "You need to stop running," Felix says, his voice low but urgent. "You can't keep hiding from me, Aria. I'll always find you." Aria's chest tightens, but she forces herself to stand tall. "I'm not hiding from you, Felix. I'm protecting myself, and I'll protect my child too." Felix steps closer, his face a mask of frustration and anger. "You think you can handle this alone? You're nothing without me." But Aria doesn't flinch this time. "I don't need you, Felix. Not anymore." The words feel like a declaration of independence, a promise to herself that she will no longer be controlled. For the first time, she feels a flicker of something, courage, maybe, the idea that she can do this on her own, even if it means facing the consequences. Felix stares at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, without a word, he turns and walks away. And in that moment, Aria realizes that perhaps the true battle is not with Felix. It's with the fear inside her, the fear that she can't overcome. She still has a long way to go, but for the first time in what feels like forever, she feels like she might be able to win. The house feels strangely quiet. The tension that had been so prevalent for the past few weeks seems to have eased, but only momentarily. It's as if the air itself is holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable storm that looms on the horizon. Aria has noticed a change in herself. She feels more in control, or at least, she's learning how to appear that way. The cracks in her composure are still there, but she's learned to hide them behind a mask of resolve. Isaac has become her quiet anchor, though she knows it's becoming harder for him to keep up the facade. He's been more distant, his eyes filled with unspoken questions that neither of them dares to voice. There are times when Aria catches him watching her, his expression conflicted, torn between wanting to protect her and knowing that he can't solve everything. His silence speaks volumes, and it's beginning to wear on her. "I wish things could be different," Aria confides to him one evening as they sit together in the dimly lit living room, the glow from the fireplace flickering softly. Isaac looks at her, his face marked with concern. "We're doing the best we can. But you deserve better than this, Aria. You deserve to be happy. This isn't your fight alone." Aria swallows, the lump in her throat growing. The weight of Isaac's words presses down on her, and she wonders if he truly believes it. How can she ever be happy in a situation like this? She looks down at her hands, clutching the fabric of her jeans tightly. "I don't know if I can be happy again," she admits, the vulnerability in her voice taking her by surprise. "I don't know if I'll ever feel safe or free." Isaac reaches out, his hand gently brushing against hers. The touch is soft but sincere, a reminder that despite everything, there are still people who care. "You'll find a way, Aria. I know you will." But even as he says the words, a sense of doubt creeps in. Aria knows that the road ahead is filled with obstacles, and she's not sure she's strong enough to face them alone. The fear of losing herself, and the child she carries, overwhelms her at times. Still, she holds onto Isaac's words, a flicker of hope in the darkness. Felix's presence is impossible to ignore, even when he's not physically in the room. His influence lingers like a shadow, casting a chill over everything. Aria tries to maintain a semblance of normalcy, but it's becoming harder and harder. The weight of her decision to keep the baby gnaws at her, and Felix's constant reminders of her failure make her feel as though she's walking on a tightrope, teetering between two worlds. One afternoon, she can no longer avoid him. Felix shows up unannounced, his posture rigid with purpose, his jaw clenched. There's something in the air, an undercurrent of danger that makes Aria's heart race as he steps into the living room. "You think you can just go on like this?" Felix's voice is cold, cutting through the air like a knife. "You think you can have my child and not face the consequences?" Aria stands tall, despite the fear threatening to overwhelm her. She's been preparing herself for this moment, but nothing can quite prepare her for the icy venom in Felix's tone. She refuses to back down. "I'm not going to let you control me anymore, Felix," she says firmly, the words escaping her before she can second-guess them. "I'm not going to let you dictate my life or my future." Felix's eyes narrow, and for a moment, the silence between them is deafening. His expression is unreadable, but Aria knows him well enough to see the storm brewing behind his gaze. He's angry, but he's also calculating. She braces herself for the fallout. "You think you have control?" Felix sneers, stepping closer. "You think you can raise my child without me in the picture? You're wrong, Aria. I'll make sure you regret this. You can't have everything you want. You're not strong enough to handle this on your own." Aria's chest tightens as his words sink in, but she refuses to show any sign of weakness. "I'm not doing this for you, Felix. I'm doing this for me and my baby." The words hit their mark. Felix's eyes flash with something close to rage, but he doesn't raise his voice. Instead, he leans in, his breath warm against her ear. "You'll regret this. Mark my words." And with that, he turns and storms out, leaving Aria standing in the living room, her heart pounding in her chest. The air feels thick with the weight of his threat, but she stands her ground. She may be afraid, but she refuses to let him have any more power over her. In the days following the confrontation with Felix, Aria feels a shift. It's subtle, but it's there. She's no longer terrified of facing him. His words still sting, but they don't have the same hold on her as they once did. The fear is still there, but it no longer controls her. She's learning to live with it, to work through it. Isaac notices the change in her too. He sees the fire that's been rekindled within her, the determination that's slowly taking root. He watches as she begins to take small steps toward reclaiming her own agency, even in the face of Felix's threats. It's not easy, but Aria is becoming someone who no longer feels helpless, someone who is willing to fight for herself and her child. One evening, as they sit together in the kitchen, Aria looks over at Isaac, her gaze filled with gratitude. "You've been here for me, Isaac," she says softly. "Through all of this, I don't know how I would have made it without you." Isaac smiles, but there's something bittersweet in his eyes. "You've been strong, Aria. You've done more than you give yourself credit for. I'm just glad I could help." Aria swallows, her heart heavy with the weight of their unspoken feelings. There's a part of her that wants to reach out to him, to let him know how much he means to her, but the situation is too complicated. Felix's presence still looms large, and Aria doesn't know if she's ready to face that battle just yet. But despite the uncertainty, there's a flicker of something. Hope, maybe, deep within her. It's small, but it's there. For the first time in a long time, she feels like there's a chance for a different future, one where she's in control of her own life. The road ahead is still long, and the challenges are far from over, but Aria is no longer willing to back down. She's ready to fight, not just for herself, but for the life growing inside her. And with Isaac by her side, she knows she might just have a chance. The silence that hangs over the house is deafening. Since the confrontation with Felix, the atmosphere feels colder, more distant. Aria is constantly on edge, each sound amplifying the tension that she can't seem to shake. Felix's threats linger in the back of her mind, like a shadow she can't escape. He's not gone, not really. He's still out there, and Aria knows he'll return, relentless as ever, until he gets what he wants. Isaac, too, feels the weight of everything. He's been trying to give Aria space to process, but his worry is palpable. He can't ignore the way Aria's spirit seems to be slowly slipping from her, even as she puts on a brave face. He watches her more closely now, noticing the way she flinches at small sounds or how her eyes dart nervously when the phone rings. He wishes there was more he could do, but this battle is hers, and he knows she has to fight it on her own. But it's harder than he thought. As much as Isaac wants to be her rock, he knows she's carrying a weight far too heavy for one person to bear alone. Aria isn't just fighting for herself anymore. She's fighting for the life inside her, a child she never expected, but one she can't imagine abandoning. One evening, as they sit together in the kitchen, the conversation shifts to something Aria has been avoiding. Isaac's voice is softer than usual, but there's an undeniable urgency in it. "Aria," Isaac begins, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that makes her pulse quicken. "I've been thinking, we can't keep going like this. You can't keep pushing yourself this hard. You're going to burn out." Aria's stomach twists. She's always known that Isaac has been carrying his own burden, trying to keep her together while hiding his own uncertainty, but hearing him voice it so plainly feels like a blow to her chest. "I'm fine," Aria insists, though the words feel empty even to her. "I can handle it." "No, you can't," Isaac counters gently but firmly. "I'm not trying to say you're weak. I'm saying that you don't have to do everything by yourself. You don't have to carry the weight of all of this alone." Aria shakes her head, her breath catching in her throat. "But I have to. I made this choice, Isaac. This is my responsibility." Isaac reaches out, his hand resting lightly on hers. The warmth of his touch feels like the only comfort she's had in weeks, but the familiar ache in her chest refuses to let her feel completely safe. It doesn't have to be your responsibility alone. I'm here for you, Aria. We'll figure this out together. But as he says those words, something shifts inside Aria. The truth is, she's scared. She's terrified of what Felix might do, of how things might spiral out of control if she doesn't keep her guard up. She's afraid of losing everything: her independence, her identity, and the child she's determined to protect. The path ahead is so uncertain, and she doesn't know if she's strong enough to survive what's coming. But despite the fear, one thing is clear. She's not going to let Felix dictate her life. She won't let him take away her future or the future of her child. Days pass, and the tension between Felix and Aria reaches new heights. He hasn't made another direct move yet, but the constant pressure of his looming presence weighs on her. He knows she's not backing down, and that infuriates him. But it also scares him, because she's more dangerous to him than he ever expected. She's not the same woman he once knew. She's stronger, more determined, and willing to do whatever it takes to protect herself and her child. Felix has always played a dangerous game, using manipulation and fear as his weapons, but he's starting to realize that Aria isn't someone he can control that way anymore. She's not going to fold under pressure. One afternoon, after a particularly draining phone call with a lawyer about her options, Aria walks through the house with a sense of determination she hasn't felt in weeks. There's something inside her, an urge to take control that drives her forward, step by step. Isaac notices the change in her, the way she holds herself a little straighter, the way her eyes seem to burn with new resolve. "Are you all right?" Isaac asks, his voice laced with concern. Aria pauses, looking at him. She's not sure how to answer that question. Yes, she's afraid. Yes, she's unsure of what the future holds. But the one thing she does know is that she's done letting Felix control her every move. "I'm more than all right," she says with surprising certainty. "I'm ready to take the next step." Isaac doesn't say anything, but there's a flicker of something, pride, maybe, behind his gaze. He knows she's fighting not just for her child, but for herself. And while he still worries about the cost of this battle, he knows there's no turning back now. Aria's already made up her mind. Later that evening, Aria receives an unexpected message from Felix. The words are simple, but the implications are far more sinister. "You've made a big mistake, Aria. You don't know what you're getting yourself into." Her heart skips a beat, but she doesn't let the fear show. She knows Felix's games well enough by now. He's trying to intimidate her, but she's no longer afraid of his empty threats. Not anymore. Still, she can't help but feel a surge of anxiety as she reads his message over and over. She's walking into a dangerous territory, and she knows Felix will stop at nothing to make sure she doesn't win. But the more she thinks about it, the clearer it becomes. She's not going to back down. Aria turns to Isaac, her resolve hardening. "I'm going to make sure he doesn't destroy my future." Isaac looks at her, his gaze filled with a mixture of admiration and concern. "I know you will." The days blur as Aria prepares for the next phase of her life. She's made the decision to fight for her child, no matter the cost. She's taken legal steps, consulted with trusted friends, and found the strength to break free of Felix's emotional hold. But as the weeks go by, she begins to realize that this battle isn't just about Felix. It's about her own inner strength, her ability to trust herself again, and her ability to build the life she deserves. One evening, after another long day of paperwork and meetings, Aria sits on the porch, gazing out at the sunset. The colors of the sky blend into each other, a mixture of reds and purples that feels oddly symbolic. She's come a long way since she first found out she was pregnant. And while the journey ahead is far from easy, there's a sense of peace that settles over her. Isaac joins her, sitting down beside her with a quiet sigh. They sit in silence for a while, neither one of them needing to speak. There's an understanding between them now, an unspoken bond that's grown from everything they've been through together. "Do you ever wonder what your life would be like if none of this had happened?" Isaac asks quietly, his voice distant. Aria glances at him, her heart heavy. "All the time," she admits. but I can't change it. I can't undo what's been done." Isaac nods, his gaze shifting to the horizon. "No, you can't. But you're not alone in this anymore, Aria. I'm here for you. Always." For the first time in a long time, Aria allows herself to lean into his presence, finding comfort in his words. It's not the answer she expected, but it's the one she needed. She may not have all the answers yet, but she knows that with Isaac by her side, she's not facing this fight alone. As the night falls, Aria takes a deep breath, feeling a glimmer of hope ignite within her. She's ready to face whatever comes next, and no matter the cost, she's prepared to fight for the life she's building. The days feel like they're blending together, each one carrying the same heavy weight of uncertainty. Aria wakes up to the same cold, familiar fear every morning, but now it's tempered with something else: resolve. She's learned to compartmentalize the fear, to put it aside when it threatens to overtake her. But it's still there, gnawing at her insides, reminding her that nothing is certain, that nothing in her life will ever be simple again. Her legal team is working tirelessly to ensure that her rights are protected, and she's been taking every necessary step to ensure her future is secure. But the constant reminder of Felix's power over her hangs over her like a dark cloud. Every time she receives another terse message from him, or hears the cold, calculated words in her mind, the fear threatens to resurface. Yet she refuses to show it. She's done cowering to him. She's done letting him control her every move. Isaac, ever the quiet support, notices the toll this is taking on her. His concern grows with each passing day. He watches her with a silent intensity, wishing he could do more to ease her burden. But he knows this is a battle she has to fight on her own, even though it hurts him to see her so weighed down. They've reached a kind of unspoken understanding between them. Isaac has stopped trying to push her to talk about everything. He knows she's trying to hold it all together, and he respects that. But there are moments when he can't help but feel like he's losing her. The woman he once knew, the carefree girl who laughed without worry, is slowly being consumed by the weight of her situation. One afternoon, as they sit together on the porch after a long day, Isaac can no longer hold his thoughts in. He turns to her, his expression serious, his voice soft but firm. "Aria, you're not alone in this. I just want you to remember that. Whatever happens, I'm not going anywhere." Aria looks at him, her heart tight with emotion. She knows what he's trying to say. She's seen the way his eyes have followed her, the way he's always there, even when she doesn't ask for help. But she can't lean on him the way she wants to. She can't allow herself to fully trust anyone again, not even Isaac. She's learned the hard way that people who seem like they'll always be there can disappear in the blink of an eye. "I know you're here, Isaac," she says quietly, her voice betraying a flicker of vulnerability. "But I don't know how much longer I can keep going like this." Isaac's gaze softens. "You don't have to do it all by yourself." But Aria just shakes her head, her chest tightening as the weight of everything becomes too much to bear. "I have to, Isaac. I can't let myself rely on anyone, not even you." Isaac's face falls, but he doesn't push her. Instead, he simply reaches out and takes her hand, holding it gently in his. "Just know that I'm here," he says, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't have to say anything. I just want you to know that." And for a brief moment, Aria allows herself to feel the comfort of his presence, even as the reality of her situation pulls her back into the abyss. She doesn't have all the answers, but with Isaac by her side, even if only in the background, she feels a small flicker of hope. It's been weeks since the last confrontation with Felix, and Aria thought, perhaps naively, that he would eventually back off. But the silence is more deafening than anything else. Felix isn't gone. He's just waiting, watching, ready to strike when the time is right. And then, without warning, he strikes. The phone call comes late one night. Aria's heart skips a beat when she sees his name flash across the screen. She hesitates before answering, her mind racing with what could possibly be the next move in this twisted game. "Aria," Felix's voice comes through the phone, cold and detached. "We need to talk." "I'm done talking, Felix," Aria responds, her voice steady but her pulse racing. I've made my decision. I'm keeping the baby. Felix's laugh on the other end is low, almost mocking. You think it's that simple? You really think you can raise my child without me? Aria's chest tightens, but she holds firm. I don't need you to raise my child. I'm not asking for your permission, Felix. There's a long pause on the other end, and then Felix's voice drops lower, more menacing. You're making a mistake, Aria, and you'll regret it. You can't fight me. I'll make sure of that. Before she can respond, the line goes dead, and Aria is left standing in the living room, her hand trembling as she holds the phone. The cold fear returns, creeping up her spine, but she refuses to let it control her. Felix's threats are empty, she tells herself. They've always been empty. But something about the way he said it, so calm, so sure, sends a chill through her bones. She knows he's not done. He's just getting started. Isaac, who's been quietly listening from the doorway, steps forward. What did he say? His voice is soft, but there's an edge of concern in it that Aria can't ignore. He's threatening me again, she replies, her voice shaking just slightly. Says I can't keep the baby, that I'll regret this. Isaac doesn't hesitate. He walks toward her, pulling her into a firm embrace. You're not alone in this, Aria. We'll figure this out. Together. But even as Isaac holds her, Aria can't shake the feeling that Felix's next move is going to be more dangerous than anything she's faced so far. And the worst part is, she has no idea what he's capable of. As the days pass, Aria can feel the tension building, like a storm on the horizon. Felix's threats hang over her like a sword, and though she tries to push them out of her mind, the fear is always there, lurking in the back of her thoughts. But despite the fear, something inside her is changing. She's no longer the broken woman she once was. She's becoming someone who can stand up for herself, who can fight back against the forces that seek to control her. Isaac's presence continues to be her anchor, but as much as she values his support, Aria knows she can't rely on him forever. She has to find her own strength, her own resolve. One afternoon, she meets with her lawyer, discussing the legal steps she needs to take in order to protect herself and her child. The conversation is long, but it feels like a step forward, a sign that she's finally taking control of her future. There's still so much uncertainty, but at least now, Aria has a plan. When she returns home, she feels a strange sense of empowerment. She's not just a victim anymore. She's a woman with choices, and for the first time in a long time, those choices feel like they belong to her. That evening, as the sun sets and the world outside darkens, Aria stands on the porch, looking out at the horizon. She feels the weight of the world on her shoulders, but she also feels something else, a quiet strength that she never knew she had. Whatever happens, she whispers to herself, I'm going to fight for my future. Isaac joins her, his presence a constant comfort. He doesn't say anything, but the way he stands beside her, the way he simply exists in that moment with her, says everything. Aria isn't alone, and no matter what Felix throws at her, she's ready to face it. Aria feels as if the walls are closing in. The mounting pressure from Felix's manipulation, the constant anxiety over the future of her pregnancy, and the ever-growing distance between herself and Isaac are all taking their toll. Despite her resolve, there are moments when the weight becomes too much to bear. She finds herself waking up in the middle of the night, her breath short, her chest tight. The fear grips her with an intensity she can't shake. Felix's face haunts her thoughts, his cold, calculating eyes, his voice that drips with venomous promises. How far will he go? What will he do to ensure she loses everything she's fought for? The once welcoming house now feels like a prison. Everywhere she turns, there are reminders of what she's up against. The news of the upcoming court hearings, the constant pressure from her lawyer to prepare for every worst-case scenario, all weighs heavily on her. Isaac, though always present, seems distant, his concern wrapped in a protective shell. Aria knows he's trying to be the pillar she needs, but his quiet strength is not enough. She wants more from him, but she also knows she's asking him to carry a burden that's not his to bear. The truth is, she doesn't want to depend on him, or anyone, anymore. One evening, as they sit across from each other at the dinner table, an uncomfortable silence stretches between them. Isaac's eyes are heavy with unsaid words. His brows furrow as if he's searching for a way to say what he's thinking, but Aria can't meet his gaze. She knows what he's going to say. He's going to ask her to let him help her, but she doesn't want to hear it. Not tonight. Aria, Isaac finally speaks, his voice soft but firm. You don't have to do this alone. I can't keep watching you struggle like this. Aria looks at him, her heart heavy. I don't have a choice, Isaac. You don't understand. No one does. Isaac reaches across the table, gently grasping her hand. His eyes search hers, his concern obvious. I understand more than you think. You're not in this alone. I'm not going anywhere. Aria shakes her head, her voice trembling. I can't keep depending on you. I can't keep being weak. Isaac's expression softens, his gaze unwavering. You're not weak, Aria. You're the strongest person I know. But Aria can't shake the overwhelming sense of helplessness that clings to her. The fight isn't just against Felix anymore. It's against herself, against the belief that she is somehow inadequate, somehow unworthy of love or support. It's a battle she's not sure she can win. The confrontation comes sooner than Aria expects. Felix's threats had been building, his words more menacing and manipulative with each passing day. It was only a matter of time before he made good on his promises. The phone rings late one night, the name flashing on the screen sending a chill down Aria's spine. Felix. She hesitates for a moment, but she knows she can't avoid him any longer. With a deep breath, she answers. Aria. Felix's voice is cold, detached. It's time we had another talk. Her pulse quickens, but she steels herself. I've told you already, Felix. I'm keeping the baby. I don't need your permission. Felix's laughter cuts through the tension, mocking and cruel. You really think it's that simple? Do you honestly believe you can just walk away from this? You don't know what you're getting into. The fear that she's tried so hard to suppress begins to claw its way back to the surface, but she refuses to show it. I'm not afraid of you, Felix. I won't let you control me. His voice lowers, and Aria feels the danger in every word. You're making a mistake, and you'll pay for it. He hangs up abruptly, leaving Aria trembling in the aftermath of their exchange. She's not sure if it's the fear or the anger that burns within her, but she knows one thing for sure. This isn't over. Felix is about to escalate things, and she doesn't know if she's ready for what comes next. Aria has been running on fumes for days now, caught in a vicious cycle of sleepless nights and constant worry. She's been trying to prepare herself for the battle that's about to unfold, but nothing could have prepared her for the next shocking development. Felix's legal team files for full custody of the baby, citing Aria's unstable mental health and inability to provide a proper environment. The claim is baseless, but it's a calculated move, a direct attack on her character, her reputation, everything she holds dear. The papers hit her like a punch to the gut. She feels as though the ground has been ripped out from under her. How can they do this? How can Felix be so cruel, so willing to destroy her at any cost? Isaac, ever the steady presence, is with her when she reads the papers. He watches her face fall as the reality of Felix's manipulation sinks in. Aria, he says softly, this is just another move in his game. We'll fight it. You're stronger than you think. But Aria can't hear him. The words are muffled by the panic surging through her veins. Her world is crumbling, and she's helpless to stop it. I can't lose my baby, Isaac. I can't let him take everything from me. Isaac pulls her into his arms, offering her comfort in a way only he can. He's not asking her to be strong in this moment. He's just holding her, letting her feel the support she so desperately needs. But even as he holds her, Aria knows that the real fight is just beginning. She's facing a man who will stop at nothing to get what he wants, and the law will be on his side every step of the way. But for the first time, Aria feels the flicker of a fire inside her, a desire to fight back, to protect what's hers. As the court date looms, Aria prepares herself for the most difficult fight of her life. Felix's legal team is ruthless, and she knows they'll pull every trick in the book to win. But she's not backing down. With Isaac by her side and a legal team that believes in her, Aria stands tall. She refuses to let Felix win. She won't let him take her child from her. The courtroom is cold. The atmosphere tense as the case unfolds. Felix's attorney presents a picture of Aria as an unfit mother, citing her supposed unstable mental state and the supposed risks of her raising the child. The accusations are baseless, but Felix's wealth and influence are powerful weapons in this battle. When it's Aria's turn to speak, she takes a deep breath, her hands trembling as she steps forward. Her voice is calm, measured, but filled with the raw strength she's found within herself over the past few months. "I am not a perfect person," she says, her eyes meeting the judge's with unwavering resolve. "But I am a mother. I am capable of loving and protecting my child. No one, especially not Felix, has the right to take that away from me." She turns to face Felix, her gaze unyielding. "I will fight for my child. I will protect my family, no matter the cost. I'm done letting you control me. This ends now." The room falls silent, and for the first time in what feels like forever, Aria feels a sense of power, of control over her own fate. The battle is far from over, but she's ready to face whatever comes next. Isaac stands beside her, his presence a constant source of strength. They may not know what the future holds, but together, they'll face it head-on. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the story. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more delightful stories.